If you've been thinking about going gluten-free, I want to explain why it may not be a healthy decision, but I want to show you what to do instead. Hey, it's Kara. Welcome back to my channel. I work with women to help them lose weight and decrease inflammation in a sustainable way. That means no dieting, counting calories, or needing prepackaged products. In today's video, I'm going to explain the misconceptions about gluten, going gluten-free, and why you shouldn't remove it unless you're allergic to it. If you want to look and feel your best without having to rely on dieting and haven't subscribed already, then hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to be notified every single time I put out a new video. So I commonly hear people say something like, well, it's gluten-free, as if that makes it somehow healthy. But they'll be talking about pizza or some prepackaged cookie. And that's the confusing thing about gluten-free. Somewhere along the line, it became synonymous with healthy. So people think they're being healthy because they're gluten-free. That's why I had to make this video, to clear up all the confusion and misconceptions surrounding gluten. Now, I need to preface what I'm about to talk about. So several years ago, our family went gluten-free because my oldest daughter and husband both have severe intolerances. My husband ate a piece of cheese that had rubbed up against a pizza crust, and it sent him into a reaction that lasted several days. So for the sake of their health, they had to be gluten-free. We did this as a family, but the rest of us have actually begun implementing some gluten back into our diet in a very strategic way so we don't set ourselves up for long-term problems. I'll explain here in a moment what I'm referring to. But before I get into talking about why you shouldn't eliminate gluten from your diet, let's first talk about what gluten is exactly. I've talked to a lot of women who really don't even know what it is. They know it has something to do with bread, but then they'll see gluten-free shampoo and that's kind of confusing. I mean, what do bread and hair care products have in common anyway? Strange, right? Well, let me explain. So gluten is just a general name for the proteins found in wheat and some other grains like barley and rye. And it can be used as a sort of stabilizing ingredient for non-food products like cosmetics or shampoo. People will often say how much better they feel after removing gluten from their diet. Again, that makes it even more confusing. That only reinforces the idea that gluten is bad and everyone should just avoid it. Because after all, it makes sense that you would feel better after removing something from your diet that's not good for you. But what if there was something else going on here? It begs the question, why do people feel better after eliminating gluten? Is it because gluten is bad? That's just got to be the reason, right? Well, not exactly. You see, most people feel better because they're not eating as much processed food and baked goods when they eliminate gluten from their diet. When it comes to elimination diets, and you could lump a gluten-free diet into that category, these diets that lead you to remove whole food groups, the reason people feel better is that they're comparing it to the standard American diet. Stop and think about it for a moment. You're bound to feel better when you reduce the amount of processed junk and fast food you're eating, whether it's done by going gluten-free, keto, or paleo. So naturally, when you eat gluten-free, you're going to feel better, because you're probably eating less sugary processed foods because of it. But more often than not, it's not because of the less gluten in your diet. So if you're thinking about going gluten-free, then you need to first answer the question, why? Is it because you want to be healthier? If that's the reason, that's perfectly fine. But as I'll explain here in a moment, this decision, the choice to not eat gluten anymore, could actually negatively affect your health. If you're simply trying to eliminate or reduce how many processed foods you eat, then there is a much better way to do it. Now, if your reason for going gluten-free is because you think it would alleviate your gas or bloating or any other internal symptoms, that's understandable. But I also don't want you to misdiagnose your GI and digestive issues for a gluten allergy. Many people will claim they can't tolerate gluten when in reality, they just have an unhealthy gut. Instead of removing gluten, they need to heal their gut. And that means taking a look at your colon and making sure you're consuming plenty of fiber and probiotics, not eliminating gluten. If you're interested in more tips to keep you going on your weight loss journey, be sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell to get notified each time I put out a new video to help you lose weight and keep it off without dieting, counting calories, or feeling deprived. Okay, so this brings us to the question, who should remove gluten? And it's a question you need to know the answer to if you're considering removing gluten from your diet. So according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, it's estimated that about 2 million people in the United States have celiac disease. That comes out to about 1 in every 133 Americans. Across the globe, about 1% of the world's population has it. But just because you think you're sensitive to it doesn't mean you're allergic to gluten. To know for certain you have celiac disease, you should talk to your doctor about your past health and get an actual exam. There are also a couple of tests that you can do, such as blood work. And in some cases, a GI doctor might need to do a biopsy of your small intestine. I know, it sounds a little intense, but it's actually the most accurate test to know whether you have celiac disease or not. If you've determined you have an allergy to gluten, you definitely should stop eating gluten. It can actually damage your small intestine if you continue eating it. And eliminating gluten is the only treatment for this disease. In most cases, taking out gluten out of your diet will stop your symptoms, and any damage your intestine may have sustained will heal. Now that you know who should and shouldn't eliminate gluten, let's talk about why it isn't healthy to remove it, not if you're not celiac or have a severe intolerance. Number 1, gluten-free doesn't equal healthy. We've talked about it already, but there's this misconception that just because a food doesn't have gluten in it, that it must be healthy. I hate to break it to you, but there's nothing inherently healthy about gluten-free foods. I can't tell you how many women will be eating a cookie and say it's gluten-free, so it's healthy. No, that's not how it works. A brownie doesn't become a health food because it's gluten-free. An Oreo is an Oreo, whether it has gluten or not. It's still a highly processed sugary cookie either way. Now, if you're allergic to gluten, then yes, by all means, you should choose the gluten-free treat over the gluten-containing option. But for everyone whose body can process gluten, you might as well choose the one with gluten in it. Reason number 2 that you shouldn't remove gluten if you're not allergic is you're eliminating whole grains. By now, I hope we can agree that gluten is not the problem. Aside from the misconception, the reason gluten has been vilified as the evil monster lurking in your food is that it's often found in highly processed foods. And of course, highly processed foods containing gluten can be harmful, but so can any highly processed food. Gluten isn't the problem. Removing gluten altogether from your diet can become a problem because you're eliminating the number 1 source of whole grains in the American diet, which is wheat. Studies have actually shown that people who eliminate gluten when they don't need to increase their risk of heart disease. And heart disease is the number 1 leading cause of death here in the United States. Many people have inaccurately associated gut damage with gluten, but there's actually little evidence to support this. Now, if you have been diagnosed with celiac or you just think you need to go gluten-free for some other reason, then I encourage you to increase the amount of gluten-free whole grains you eat, like oats and quinoa. And lastly, reason number 3 that you shouldn't remove gluten if you're not allergic. You're eliminating key nutrients your body needs. Many people think you'll develop an allergy or intolerance if you stop eating something, but it's not as black and white as you might think. If you're truly allergic to a food, that means you have a sensitivity to the chemical compounds or proteins in that food, and it's most likely a genetic factor you've inherited from your parents. But when it comes to intolerances, there are many factors that may contribute to it. In some cases, such as a lactose intolerance, for example, the person lacks the enzymes needed to properly digest certain proteins found in the food. And if you have an intolerance, even if it's a severe one, there's a threshold to the amount you can actually tolerate. Even the most lactose intolerant person can handle a drop of milk on their tongue. But in most cases, you just need to know how much you can handle before it bothers you. So I wouldn't be so worried about developing an intolerance to gluten, but you should be concerned about all the things you're going to miss out on if you remove gluten from your diet. Studies show that people who remove gluten are often deficient in nutrients such as iron, calcium, vitamin B12, zinc, and even fiber. These vitamins and minerals are an essential part of your health, and taking away key sources only makes it more difficult to get them in your diet. And if you spent any time with me, you know how I feel about fiber. Fiber is truly a nutritional wonder. It improves gut health, strengthens your immune system, improves mental function. It even improves weight management. So before you decide to go gluten-free, I want to encourage you to stop and think through why eliminating it from your diet may not be as healthy as you think. If you've been diagnosed with celiac disease, it's a different story for you. You certainly should be gluten-free. But if it's an intolerance, don't throw the baby out with the water. Remember, whole grains are an important part of a healthy diet. So before you completely eliminate gluten, consider testing it to see how much you're comfortable consuming. And if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel so you catch my simple nutrition tips each week to help you reach your goals, maintain them, and build upon them.